First Gaza and now Charlie Kirk's assassination has truly exposed the rogue regime of the settler colony of Israel in front of Americans. More and more Americans are now finally waking up to the reality of Israel's brutal control of their country. They are realizing how a tiny illegal settler colony built on the stolen land of Palestinians has been destroying their vast resources by constantly sucking billions of dollars of aid every year and polluting their society with their demonic and barbaric policy implementation with the help of their compromised stooges in the Congress and the Senate. You only have to see the reaction from bloodthirsty terrorist Benjamin Netanyahu in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's assassination to truly understand why this monster is so scared of the potential fallout of his suspected role. War criminal Netanyahu, currently wanted by the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity, issued two video statements. Yes, two video statements to simply deny his role in Charlie Kirk's assassination. This was his recent video message where he kept explaining for 2 minutes how Israel didn't kill Charlie Kirk.
Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister, said that the bigger the lie, the faster it will spread. Well, somebody has fabricated a monstrous big lie that Israel had something to do with Charlie Kirk's horrific murder. This is insane. It is false. It is outrageous. Charlie Kirk was a giant, a once-in-a-century talent who defended freedom, defended America, defended our common Judeo-Christian civilization. Charlie loved Israel. He loved the Jewish people. He told me so in a letter that he sent me just a few months ago. One of my greatest joys as a Christian, he said, is advocating for Israel and forming alliances with Jews to protect Judeo-Christian civilization. He encouraged me to make the case directly to the American people about how vital Israel is to U.S. national security. He told me, the Holy Land is so important to my life, it pains me to see support for Israel slip away. Now, if Charlie disagreed with a policy of mine or a decision here and there, not only did I not mind, I welcomed it. This is the essence of Charlie. This is the essence of a free country. It's exactly what Charlie stood for. And I knew that his suggestions always came from the heart, from his love for Israel and from his love for the Jewish people. A few weeks before his death, I spoke to Charlie. I invited him to visit Israel again. And sadly, that won't happen. Now some are peddling these disgusting rumors, perhaps out of obsession, perhaps with Qatari funding. What I do know is this: Charlie Kirk was a great man, and a great man deserves honor, not lies. Rest in peace, Charlie Kirk. May your memory be a blessing.
Now, this hasn't convinced people on the right in the US, including those who knew Charlie Kirk very well. Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson are two of them. Listen to what Candace has to say to Animal Netanyahu's second clarification.
You guys remember Bibi recently was on a PR blitz, despite the fact that he was, fighting this 96,000 front war because Israel didn't do nothing. Okay. He was doing a ton of podcasts in America. He went on to Patrick Bet-David's podcast. He went on to Brandon Tatum's podcast. He went on to the Nelk Boys podcast. Anybody find it weird he didn't do Charlie Kirk's show? Homie very quickly told us that Charlie was penning love letters to him in May. I just love you so much. It's amazing. They were so close. The boys just hits him up like, hey, I know we're fighting this 97,000 front war because we're always the victims, but do you want to just come and maybe stay at my place for the weekend here in Israel? Like, that's the vibe that Bibi was rushing to present to the media. So why didn't he do Charlie Kirk's show? I'll leave it as a question for you guys. Common sense, okay? I don't like small lies. And remember, Bibi started this. I am responding to his shamelessness, shameless misrepresentation of what Charlie was going through and what Charlie was saying. Because, and I want to be clear, to me right now, it feels, and I'm using a corporate term here, a bit like a hostile takeover, okay? Charlie builds the company organically on the basis of Charlie and Charlie's honest ideas. Suddenly, that company's got a lot of money, and Charlie's honest ideas are starting to change or maybe add more color. And now he's getting financial threats. He's being called names. He increasingly, he's being told who and what he's allowed to speak to, and he's taking a stance. He's taking a stand privately up to these people, and then it doesn't matter anymore because Charlie's dead, and those very same people who were pressing him are now doing, like, very quickly trying to set in stone that, oh, Charlie, essentially the energy is Charlie died for Israel. He's just one of us. Nobody ask any more questions. That is literally untrue, and we're not going to allow it. Okay? It's just not true.
As for Tucker, he has gone on record to explain how Charlie Kirk despised Netanyahu.
What he said was completely untrue. Charlie didn't hate Jews. He loved Jews. He had tons of friends who were Jews. He loved the state of Israel. He loved going there. He did not like Bibi Netanyahu, and he said that to me many times, and he said it to people around him many times. He felt that Bibi Netanyahu was a very destructive force. He was appalled by what was happening in Gaza. He was, above all, resentful that he believed Netanyahu was using the United States to prosecute his wars for the benefit of his country, and that it was shameful and embarrassing and bad for the United States, and he resented it. Didn't hate Netanyahu. He wasn't out there with a placard saying that, but he certainly expressed that to me and a lot of other people. And there's no question that Bibi's defenders on the internet will call me a liar or a kook, but that's a fact. And enough text messages exist that I think it can probably be verified in pretty short order. Not that it needs to be, because that is true. Shortly after that speech, there was a very intense attack on Charlie, and to some extent on me, not that I really noticed.
Charlie Kirk was a divisive man, no doubt. He held deeply offensive views about people of Gaza and Muslims in general. But the Israel's illegal attack on Iran was perhaps the turning point for him, when he began to openly criticize Israel. But what may have left the rogue regime of war criminal Netanyahu increasingly alarmed was this video. Here, Charlie Kirk was openly challenging the legitimacy of the Gaza genocide. He literally implied that 7th of October attacks was Netanyahu's own creation.
I gotta be careful the way I say this. They're gonna try to ethnically cleanse Gaza. Yep. I mean, I don't use that term lightly, okay? They're talking about basically removing 2.5 million people from there, okay? And honestly, they have a mandate to go seek justice and revenge. They do. This idea that they need to have a truce or a peace treaty, that's morally crap after you see women and children be burned alive and dragged to the streets. But there are some serious questions here, Patrick. And let me tell you, my pattern recognition over the last 5 years has become pretty sharp. COVID, Maui fires, Epstein. When I see a story and it doesn't click, our guts are usually right. So I've been to Israel many times. The whole country's a fortress. When I first heard this story, I still had the same gut instinct that I did initially. I find this very hard to believe. I've been to that Gaza border. You cannot go 10 feet without running into a 19-year-old with an AR-15 or an automatic machine gun that's an IDF soldier. Right, the whole country is surveilled, and so let me just kind of go through this. We don't talk about Israeli politics very often, and most Americans don't know this. The last 9 months, Israel was on the brink of civil war. It's not an exaggeration. This judicial stuff, there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis taking to the streets because Bibi Netanyahu was basically redefining the Israeli constitution. That's not an exaggeration, right? He said the judicial branch has too much power. There were protests planned this week against Netanyahu, where they anticipated tens of thousands of people to take to the streets. That's all gone, Patrick. Netanyahu now has an emergency government and a mandate to lead. I'm not willing to go so far that saying that Netanyahu knew or there was intelligence here, but I think some questions need to be asked. Was there a stand down order? Was there a stand down order?
We have learned from reporting in the Israeli media that when the organizers of the Nova festival called for the IDF's help at 7 a.m. on the 7th of October, the organizers were told to fend for themselves. In fact, the first IDF soldier to arrive at the scene was at 3 p.m., 8 hours after the call for help was made. And how long did it take for Israeli terrorists to launch the genocidal campaign in Gaza? Just 4 hours. So it took them 8 hours to send an IDF soldier to the Nova festival scene, but they waited for just 4 hours to start slaughtering Palestinians. Listen to this man, Ben Swan, from Truth in Media.
That YouTube has now taken down a video in which Charlie Kirk questioned whether or not on October 7th, the Israeli government issued a so-called stand-down order.
Was there a stand down order? Phew. Was there a stand down order? 6 hours? I don't believe it. Israel's the size of New Jersey. When I took a helicopter ride from Jerusalem to the Gaza border, it's 45 minutes. Wow. 6 hours. They're live streaming the killing of Jews. Did somebody in the government say stand down?
Well, the reality is that Charlie Kirk, in his questioning, was exactly right. Last year, we put together a series of videos specifically about October 7th. And in it, we talked specifically about this issue. Was there a stand-down order that was issued by the Israeli government that prevented the military from going in and rescuing people, taking them out of this situation where they were being held by Hamas? Again, what Charlie Kirk said there was correct, but here's the proof that backs it up. And once the Hamas attacks began, the time it took the Israeli army and rescue teams to arrive, fight, and rescue Israelis at the different kibbutz communities and sites being attacked, well, that ranged anywhere from 4 hours to more than 20 hours. Even the New York Times has reported, quote, thousands of soldiers were less than 40 minutes from the towns that were under attack. So why did it take so long for help to arrive? And we've discussed how days before the festival, 2 entire brigades of soldiers were taken away from the area of the Gaza border and then sent to the West Bank. And you might think that immediately upon receiving information of a devastating attack on partygoers, military authorities would alert units to immediately exit their bases, race to the site of the conflict, and go on the counterattack, right? But that's not what happened. Haaretz reported, quote, at 7 a.m., the party organizer called Lieutenant Colonel Elad Zendani, the man tasked with approving the festival, and told him that terrorists were shooting the partygoers. He suggested that they fend for themselves. The first IDF forces arrived at the party scene at 3 p.m. That's 8 hours for a response time for one of the most efficient, capable, and well-militarized security forces in the world, operating in a country the size of New Jersey, with their Gaza division only a few miles away. What makes it even more strange, around 4 hours into the Hamas assault at 10:46 a.m., Israel was already launching operations and bombing targets inside of Gaza. So hold on, let that sink in.
And then we have reams of evidence to suggest that most of those killed in the Nova festival were by Israeli terrorists themselves under their so-called Hannibal directive. So why was Charlie Kirk a threat to Netanyahu? That's because Kirk wasn't just a MAGA supporter or MAGA podcaster. He was arguably the only MAGA youth icon so close to Donald Trump. There were open suggestions that he should be running for the White House in the future. And this was a frightening prospect for Netanyahu. Israelis hate bad PR, but when the person responsible for that adverse PR or publicity has the potential to occupy the White House and become so powerful that he would be in a position to dictate major policy decisions, this would mean a death to the idea of the settler colony of Israel. This is the philosophy that drives Israeli terrorists to use their lobby groups to keep blackmailing members of the Congress and the Senate. They activated only recently their billionaire donors to ensure that people like Marjorie Taylor Greene weren't re-elected for being a pain in the neck to Israel. So when people raise suspicion on Netanyahu's clarification, they are right. As they say, there is no smoke without fire. That's it from me. Thank you very much for your support of this platform and our journalism on buymeacoffee.com and Patreon. If you do think that our journalism is worth supporting, then you too should consider becoming part of it. Details are there in the description of this video. In the meantime, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so, because that's one of the many ways you can support independent journalism. God bless you all.